You can imagine what an exciting moment it is when you're sitting at home playing the record of someone whose voice you admire very much, and then suddenly the bell rings, the door opens, and in they come. Well, that's what happened to me not long ago when Judy Garland was in London. Judy and I are old friends because we met when she was here 7 years ago. But she had never been to my home, and I hadn't met her husband, who she had married since that previous visit. She wanted me to meet him, and she brought him to see me. Sid's a great big fellow who looks like the great sire he once was, and Judy was wearing a black dress and coat and a very cute little Juliet cap with jewels decorated in it. I'm not very good at describing these things, but I think you can see it. And also she had on her wrists pearl bracelets. Well, she took off her coat and she sat down, and typically the first thing she said was, "Oh, do turn that off." You see, it still makes her shy to listen to her own voice. Judy, you were just deciding whether to get married last time you were over here, and now you have decided, and it's turned out very well, hasn't it?
Oh, it's turned out very well, as a matter of fact. I don't like to talk about it much in front of him because he'll become really impossible then, but it's turned out very well, don't you think so?
Judy let out her secret to me, because when I asked her about the success of your marriage, she said to me, well, I've learned at last how important it is to give way sometimes. Didn't you, Judy?
You have to. I have. That's something I didn't know before, you see. But if you're married to a man like Sid, you darn well have to give way. Oh, no, don't think
I guess he gives way, too.
Yes, he does. But I think it's sort of it's a pretty even...
Yeah, a little saccharine here now.
No, we're not. I like it.
And what happens now when you're discussing the show, for instance? How much influence does Sid have over choosing your songs and the way the actors?
I follow his advice. He has awfully good taste and an awfully good sense of showmanship, which sometimes when you're performing you lose. And I've left the whole thing up to Sid, and he has advised me. This is something that's brand new to you. I don't think I've told you before now.
But it's enormously balanced, the act, or whatever one calls it, the show, isn't it, now? The amount of you, and then the little bits in between with the dancers, and then back to you again. That's all Sid's production, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, that's tremendously good. It's enormously more polished than when Judy was here 7 years ago and we first made friends, and that was before she decided to marry you, so...
That's come because of trial and error.
Yes.
In different theaters over a period of years. And after playing these theaters, Judy's played, she's found that she knows just when a song should be sung and when not to sing a song for certain audiences, and knows that possibly she'll save one song for a certain spot, and it's just trial and error.
I don't know if, like myself, you're old enough to have seen Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, or whether you only really first met her on the screen in her great comeback film, A Star is Born, in which she sang, of course, that great number, Born in a Trunk. But what struck me so much was how little she has changed. Although she's 35 now, and of course no longer looks like the child who first captured the world as the heroine of The Wizard of Oz, yet she still has an extraordinary childlike look. Her skin is very, very smooth, and she has these enormous brilliant eyes, and she has the laughter of a child, and again she's completely unself-conscious. I long to know more about her own childhood. I long to know how it all started. Why did she suddenly become this comet in Hollywood? A comet that was to blaze and for time fade. We all know the tragedy of those years, which she has now come through. But when she looks back and talks about that childhood and the kind of life she led herself, there is no bitterness, only a warm regard for her own family. How far back can you remember now? Can you remember 2 or 3?
I can go back to about 2.5, 3, when I first started on the stage.
Can you see yourself at that age on the
stage? Yes,
what did you wear?
I wore a little white costume my mother made for me. It was sort of a bum-looking top, didn't fit skirt and black Mary Jane slippers.
Oh, yeah.
And long, dark curls.
And what did you do, Judy?
I sang jingle bells. That's about all I could do.
You sang jingle bells and brought the house down.
Rang a little bell and sang jingle bells, and everybody liked it, I guess.
Did the applause get your head? You wanted to do it every night, then?
Yes. Oh, yes. I did.
You had a spot in the show.
Well, my mother and father, this is what it was. My mother and father were billed as Jack and Virginia Lee,
Oh, yes.
which was the stage name.
Yes.
And because our real name is Gum.
Gum.
Gum, yes. My name is Frances Gum.
Gum.
Isn't that a terrible name?
It was such a terrible
But anyway, my mother and father would go on, and we'd sit out in front and applaud, the three kids, and then we'd go backstage, and my mother and father would sit out and applaud, and we always booked ourselves as separate acts to get more money. We never went as a family, because if we went as a whole family, we wouldn't get as much money as two separate acts. So that's where we got California from Minnesota.
What did you get, the three little girls? Then?
Well, for years we were in vaudeville. I was in vaudeville for 10 years before movies, because I went into vaudeville when I was 2, and wasn't until I was 12, and we got, at the most, for the four of us, about $100 a week. For the four of us. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That wasn't bad.
No, that's right.
For a rotten act.
By the time you've been doing it for 10 years, you were a veteran, weren't you?
Yes.
When you went into films later, did that seem easy after the vaudeville?
It was different because I never did any acting in vaudeville. All I did was sing. I never read any lines or knew what directing was or anything, so it was new. But I don't think there's anything in the world that can give you the kind of experience and background that real old-fashioned vaudeville can give you.
Of all the songs you've ever sung, Judy, what's your own favourite?
Well, it's going to sound very silly when I say, but actually, Over the Rainbow.
Sing a few bars of it now.
Oh, now, come on.
Come on, can't you? Just for me. Can you?
I think you're shocking that.
Come on.
I know. Somewhere over the rainbow, and that's enough for you, Godfrey Wynn. Goodbye.